Cool. Should we podcast?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest, Dave Albrechta.
Yeah.
I got to share with you and everybody listening, I'm super excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm going to tee it up and kind of paint a backstory of why. But you and I, we've had a couple of professional meetings now, and I've gotten to know you a little bit. I've gotten to know your practice a little bit. And the way I'm going to tee it up, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've got a decade or so worth of attorney experience.
Yep.
Most of it in litigation
Right.
and, kind of the scary, lawyer world stuff.
Yeah.
And, I got a chance to sit in your office, and it's got this great atmosphere and environment there. And the long story short is that you're taking what I'm going to consider a fresh approach to law and conflict resolution and just this approach to the whole thing. So that's going to tee it up that in my conversations with you, all I could think about is like, oh my gosh, I got a podcast. I got to really pick your brain and learn about it. Where I want to start, if it's okay with you, is paint a little bit of that background picture, though. Of your journey into law to begin with, and kind of like walk me through the early stages of your law career.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a third generation lawyer. So my grandpa was a judge in my small hometown. I grew up in rural Ohio. My dad's is a lawyer, will probably be a lawyer till he dies. I don't think he'll ever retire. So it's kind of what I always knew I was going to do. I don't think there was ever really much question about that. I got a philosophy undergrad degree. There's only so many things.
That's insightful.
Yeah, only so many places that goes. Law school is one of them. I did politics for a brief stint. So I met my wife on a governor's campaign right out of or in undergrad, and then worked for the governor for a few years. Worked for the state senate, and then got kind of sick of the political world, and law school was next. Just kind of the next step.
Law school would be
it's the next step.
The breath of fresh air.
Exactly.
Politics to law.
Yeah. Well, you get some more control over it, So my wife and I went to school together. So we moved back to my hometown in Ohio, went to the University of Toledo.
And you guys were already married?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we'd been married for a couple of years, and took every class together, studied for the bar together, and we were actually signed up for Ohio and Colorado bar exams. Colorado just happened to be first. Took that one and passed it, and then we got out of there.
Right.
We're not doing that again. We canceled our Ohio bar and just moved out here. So
there was a story on your website. I'm curious because I didn't realize you guys were married before.
Yeah.
Which we could have a whole podcast episode.
We
about
could,
that.
yeah.
You guys being married, going to school together, starting a business together. Practicing together, all these things. But there was an anecdote on your website about some exam or a final or something that you guys got the exact same score on, but almost opposite in terms of.
Yeah.
Tell me that story.
There's some internal debate about that, but that's how I remember it. I remember
which means it's true.
I remember that we had almost the identical score. This professor, she was our torts professor, first year torts class, which is one of the classes everyone has to take. And she had a process, not many other professors did this, but after the first exam, she called everybody in and met with them individually and went through their answers just to kind of talk about how it went. And we scheduled our appointments back to back, obviously. We commuted an hour to school.
Oh, geez.
So that created logistical issues, and we went to school at night. So we showed up together for our separate interviews to go through our exam, and she came out and she looked at us and just kind of laughed and said, "You know what? I've never done this before, but why don't you both come in here?" And so she sat down, and again, this is my recollection, is it was kind of like it started off with kind of like it was really weird. I was going through your exams. You guys got the same score,
and
almost the exact. Yeah. So I'm like, oh my God, she's accusing us of cheating. And she's like, I was initially suspicious. And then I started looking through it to prepare for our meeting, and I realized you got almost the opposite answers. Everything you, David, got right, Eleni got wrong, and vice versa. And I should say, I don't think our scores were identical because my wife booked the class and she got the best grade in the class and I did not. So
fair.
I should say that. But either way, that's the general story. And she went into this analysis and she's like she was like, I was just fascinated by it. So I like spent all this time like breaking down your exams. And she's like, when I started categorizing which ones you were each getting right, it was really clear that my wife's name is Eleni, that Eleni's answers were all very detailed. She clearly could memorize the content, these technical process details and remembering rules, and that I was getting more of the big picture stuff and had the theory and the concepts and that kind of thing. And she said to us that, that I was seeing the forest for the trees and Eleni was seeing the trees for the forest.
Right.
So we've, that worked. It was really helpful to have that in the first year because that was actually really helpful advice in law school. We studied for every exam together. And so Eleni would really focus on the rules and so we knew where our specialties were.
Details, yeah.
And I had better grasp of kind of big concepts. And so that was really helpful both in law school and the bar exam. And then it has applied ever since.
And business and everything.
For everything. It's just helped us understand how our brains work and they fit together very well.
Right. So then you guys, which I love, and like I said, I think it's a cool anecdote because of how insightful that is on, like a marriage, a business partnership, the
everything.
whole thing. Yeah, it's so cool.
Raising kids.
Right. Yeah, opposites attract. So then though you guys graduate and you decide you're going to start a practice.
Yeah, so we went to school at night. So we did night school. We were working for my dad's firm full time during the day. And so we had this really great experience that not many people get to have. You can't practice law as a law student, but he let us really like get our hands into the business side.
Yeah.
And so
I gotta imagine that was so one of the things, and I don't want us to get too off track, but I talk to entrepreneurs often that learned a thing, whether it's a chiropractor or an attorney or an electrician or whatever, and then built a business on the thing that they learned. Yeah. And there's such a steep learning curve on the business side.
Yeah.
Like in law school, they don't teach you about business.
No.
They teach you about law.
Right.
How fascinating. I never even thought of that would apply in these professional trades too, like
that
law
applies,
and all that.
Applies everywhere, right? And no one teaches you how to do it unless you go to business school.
Right.
None of these places really, you get like, I think we did maybe, we had like this half credit class where we did kind of what does it mean to set up a practice,
like a 101.
But that doesn't teach you how to run a business. No. It teaches you how to maybe like set it up.
I'm not sure that school even does.
No, it doesn't. I don't think it does at all. So we got 4 years basically of running a law firm, like a small, it was at that time it was 2 attorneys and 3 or 4 staff, and it grew over time. And so we got to help with the budget, and we were kind of helping them move out of an older way of doing things. So we kind of transitioned them to Dropbox, and this was in like 2010, 11. So we got all that hands-on experience. So I think a lot of the reason that lawyers don't open their own practice, because not many do, is that you're scared of the business side. You might really understand the law, but you got to run a business on top of it.
I studied marketing. I mean, I've lived and breathed marketing my whole life. I studied it at school, and I went to the School of Business, but I studied marketing. Yeah. And then I did 11 years in the corporate world. Yep. And then started, and I the learning curve I've experienced from a business ownership perspective is insanely steep. Like,
it's huge.
I look back over the last 4 years, and I've learned more in the last 4 years than the rest of my life combined. Probably.
That's right.
Just like, so yeah,
actually
it
doing
makes so
it,
much sense to think that. Yeah, most attorneys aren't starting practices. I never even thought about that. Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got the liability and malpractice risks, and so there's the idea that you're kind of ingrained with is that law school in particular, if you compare it to other professions, most other professions have some practical element in their education system. Law does not.
Meaning, elaborate that on for me, a practical
Right.
element.
So like for a doctor, you've got to do a residency.
Oh, got it.
You have to
Yeah.
actually go practice before you can just go out on your own and be a
Right.
doctor. Lawyers don't have to do that. You just go, all you have to do is pass the bar.
And then you're a lawyer.
And law school, you can choose to do clinics and that kind of stuff, but it's not a requirement.
So what's a paralegal?
Paralegal is a legal assistant. They can do legal research, and there's a separate certificate for it, but it's not law school.
But it's separate. Okay.
Yeah. It's yeah. So let's see. So that element of practical. How do you do this in real life? It's scary just to think about how to be a lawyer in real life, and the trend, and on top of it. So the trend is that you either you go work for the DA or you go work in a big firm and you get 3 or 4 years under your belt, and then it kind of the apprentice idea is built into what you do after law school.
Got it.
We had done that during law school.
Cool.
And then went to school at night, which I recommend to everybody. I think everyone should do it that way, if you can. Obviously it was a family situation,
Right.
so there's not everyone can do that, but. So it took a little longer. It took 4 years, but we had all this experience. Came out. We knew we wanted to get back to Colorado. My wife had never lived outside of Denver for any period of time, and so she was done with Ohio, and I was ready to come back. And we knew we lived in my small hometown and knew we wanted to be in a small town. We had made this list of like attributes we wanted the place to have. We had traveled a lot in our political time, and I'm like, I don't think this place exists in Colorado, because we want a place without a ski resort in town, but we want it to be in the mountains. We want a river. Like we had all these things, and on our drive out, was offered a job clerking for a judge in Montrose, 10 hours a week, really, like quarter-time job. And so we moved all of our stuff into a storage unit in Denver, immediately left for Montrose, went there and did my orientation, and then just hung out down here for a while and kind of did a loop in the Four Corners and came through Durango, and just we're like, oh my God, this is everything on the list. And while we were here, we were having coffee one morning. It was like our second or third day in town. We had been checking, the Bar Association has a job board posting thing, and we had been looking at that a lot. And someone had posted, it just said, law firm for sale in the Four Corners region, something like that. It didn't say Durango. And so we called the number. Guy was in Durango selling his firm. It was a sole practitioner, and we met with him the next day, and we're like, when we made an offer, I typed up an offer that night, and because when we were working for my dad's firm, he had bought 2 other small firms in the region, and I had helped him with those deals. So I knew the contract, I knew the offers, and I put this thing together. And he's like, "All right, it looks good. Why don't you move here so I know you're serious?"
Yeah.
So we went and got all our stuff that weekend, moved out, lived in the Iron Horse. We got a month-to-month rental on the Iron Horse. Its name's changed now, but and met with him that next Monday, and he said, "Love the offer. We have a deal there, but I want you to buy my building, and it's $800,000 to buy the building." And we're like, non-starter. We don't have anything.
Right.
I was living in the Iron Horse. If I could afford that, I wouldn't be living there. That was Monday, and then on Tuesday we opened our firm.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I love how the speed.
Yeah.
The speed of execution too, and it's maybe one of the things that I relate a lot to a lot of your personality traits, and it's almost like you've got this vision. Like in my experience, I'm curious if you've seen the same thing, but I can sometimes come across as people as spontaneous. But it's not. It's that I've been thinking about it forever, and then the opportunity presented, and I took action.
That's right.
And it appeared quick or spontaneous for everybody else, but it's just like, no. I've been getting ready for this for my whole life.
We'd been planning for that for at least 4 years. I mean, in law school, we knew we were going to move, and had been thinking about how and when and what that was going to look like, and we knew we could handle running our own firm. And,
Yeah.
and it just then once it happens, it's easy to say yes.
Right.
Like, yep, doing that. Yep, I'll take that job in Montrose. Yep,
Done.
I'll go. And it just, once it starts happening, it happens quickly.
Yeah. So tell me about those early
the
days
early years.
And I want to know about because specifically one of the things I want to kind of deep dive into is the model of litigation.
Yeah.
And I think it ties into, because you were telling me a little bit about, to touch on it, but the challenges of starting a business.
Yeah.
In conjunction with obviously the being a lawyer and getting all of that, that there's some complexities in even how law offices practice with litigation and compensation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so talk to me about that from a business starting perspective. But then I also want to really understand that whole world of how the business was structured early on and kind of how the litigation process works.
Yeah. So it's a good question. So the early years were tough. We knew my dad's firm was, again, small town firm, so similar. As our town's probably like 25,000 people, so similar kind of market as here. And when you're in that kind of a space as a lawyer, it's hard to specialize.
Right.
You got to kind of take a little bit of everything. So we knew that going in. Luckily, again, we had that exposure, so I knew what that looked like in terms of coming in and doing different things every single day. One day you're doing a contract, one day you're litigating, one day you're doing family law.
Yeah.
And so partly out of fear, partly out of necessity, when we launched the website and the firm, we just put literally every area you could think of was on the website.
Yeah.
We listed everything. And then what we did is we kind of, as we started actually managing those cases on our own, learning what we really didn't like, right? So I took a divorce case in the first probably couple months. Nope, never again. But I did it. You go through the motions, and so it was easier to begin narrowing kind of what we did. And the also thing we didn't know is we didn't know what the demand was here. We didn't really, and we weren't from here, so we didn't know. We didn't know the legal community yet. We didn't know who was doing what, where there was saturation, where there wasn't. So that was another way to test that, to see who were
from
the calls.
From a competition perspective?
Just from a demand perspective,
Yeah.
who are we getting calls from? Who are the clients? Once the lawyers knew we were there, people started referring stuff. So then you get a flavor of what other people
What
aren't
the whole market's
taking.
looking
And
like, yeah.
So it was a good way to just figure that out. We knew that we wanted to do employment law. So employment law was, we each got employment law certificates. You can't quote specialize, but we did as much as you could, and knew that we wanted to be doing employee side litigation. That part of the business, employment law especially, and plaintiff's work, which is when you're suing other people, is all contingent fee agreement based.
Got it.
So what that means is you're getting a percentage of what you recover for the client
If and when you win.
And that's the big billboard advertisements. You only pay us if you win, right? That's the contingent agreement.
Which sounds great.
Sounds great. Yeah.
From a business, and I relate to it a little bit. My wife's a real estate agent.
Yeah, same thing.
And she's had, I think we actually even talked about this a little bit, but she's had deals where she's worked, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of hours.
Totally.
And then it falls through, or never happens or whatever, or
if you have
one
that
ongoing.
Or you have one that goes a week and you have this giant windfall and you didn't do a whole lot.
It's the epitome of feast or famine.
Yeah.
There's literally, she's had people that she's worked with for years and has never been paid a dime.
Yeah.
And she's had the lucky call with the cash guy that's so I guess you take both, but that's such from a business perspective, it's such it's such a risky, structure.
It's gambling.
Yeah.
It's all it is. You're meeting with clients. You're trying to decide which cases have the least amount of risk, and you're betting on the ones that you think are going to be successful.
And there's got to be a fair amount of upfront work on your end of weighing if it's winnable or not.
A lot. That happens at every phase of the case, right? And as you're going, as these cases get bigger, a lot of them, you have to decide how much cost you're going to put into it. So a lot of times, without experts, you're maybe putting between $10 to $15,000 of your own money into the case. Wow. That doesn't include the time.
Right. Hard costs.
Yeah, these are costs to pay for court reporters and transcripts, and if you're paying an expert, I mean, we've paid upwards of $50,000 into a case to get it ready for trial.
Wow.
To hire an expert and get them ready, and so every step of the way you're deciding, how much am I gonna invest in this? What do I think the outcome's gonna be? What's the value? All these things.
Right.
It's all money driven. So as we knew we wanted to build that, but we also knew from the work we'd done that it takes 4 to 5 years to build that up. Because employment cases take anywhere from 3 to 5 years if they go the distance all the way to trial. And so from the time you onboard somebody to the time you get paid out, we've got, at least a 3-year window where we've got to be making a living, but you also have to be doing this work, to get these cases prepped and ready. So that's what we did. We kind of figured out what areas we were comfortable doing that were paying the bills and keeping the lights on. And then you're trying to manage that balance between how many contingent cases are we taking on versus how much time do we have to do the hourly work.
The other stuff, yeah.
Plus running the business, which is a whole nother thing.
I was cleaning the bathroom before.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Yep.
Trust me.
Yep.
What drew you to the employment law to begin with?
Yeah, I think we kind of just took a class because we were in night school, so you didn't have a lot of options. It was just kind of whatever they offered at night. You didn't really have a choice when you started getting into the electives in your second and third year. And early on, I think in our second year when we started doing electives, there was an employment 101 class that was offered, and we both took that and really liked it. It's always felt I've always really liked the idea of it's very civil rights oriented. So it's not necessarily civil rights practice. You're not doing constitutional law, although we've done some cases that involve that. But dealing with discrimination and all of the things that relate to that just feel good.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say that. Employment law, because employees' rights are so limited, the only areas that people have to pursue an employment case are in those civil rights areas.
Yeah, got it. Of course.
And so on the plaintiff side, that now on the employer side it's different, but on the employee side, that's all you're really looking at is, was there discrimination? What happened leading up to this? And
right.
That means you're saying no to a lot of people, probably more than 80% of the people you meet with in that space. You're ultimately just explaining to them, hey, here's the law. There's no discrimination here. Just because you and Sally didn't get along, and that's not harassment. Right. That's not hostile work environment. It's got to be connected to one of these other things. And so you have to be really careful. I mean, you got to really look for the cases where there's clear, and obvious discrimination.
Yeah. And then educate me on just that overall litigation process.
Yeah.
Some of the conversations that you and I have had off camera.
Yeah.
Just about like the complexity of it and how evolving it is, once somebody goes down that path. Because, well, let's start there.
Yeah. So the litigation process, I think for people tends to happen pretty quickly. You go meet with a lawyer. I always broke the process into 3 phases. The initial phase is our investigation of the case, making sure we understand all the facts, talk to witnesses, look at all the evidence, make sure it's a good case. If we confirm that it is, then we send what we call a demand letter to the other side. That's the nasty gram everyone's scared of getting from the lawyer. Hey, we've been retained and we think you broke the law and here's what we want. And if they respond, then you have a negotiation. Phase 2 in employment law, this is different than many other areas, if not every area, is you have to go through an agency in order to go to court. So in employment law, you have to either get what's called a right to sue letter from either the Civil Rights Division, which is the state office, or the EEOC, which is the federal office. They literally give you a permission slip that says you may now go to court.
And that's because there's some level of like pre-vetting or like.
Yeah, my understanding of it is what I tell people. There's probably different beliefs about how this came to be, but I think that it was a product of the business lobby when Title VII of the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964 is what started all of this. Prior to that, there were very limited employment rights.
Right.
There was union stuff going on before that and wage stuff, hours in a day, that kind of thing. But
we should talk about the 8-hour workday.
Yeah, it's a whole nother can of worms. Yeah. This was a system, in my view, put in place to prevent people from just going straight to court.
Got it.
So there was a fear that every employee was just going to be, now they can just sue us whenever they want for whatever they want, and we're gonna get this flood of litigation. And so they put in place the EEOC and created this process that they hoped. Now, that's the cynical plaintiff side. I think the defense side, someone on the employer side would say this was intended to resolve cases prior, try to make sure, vet out, good cases versus bad cases. And that could be true too. I think over the years, for an example, I've filed hundreds of charges in those two agencies, and I've gotten 2 findings in favor of my client in 10 years.
No way.
Yeah.
That's it.
But where the cynicism comes from is that the findings don't matter. So whether they find in your favor or not, you still get a right to sue letter, and you still go to court, and you can win in court and lose in the EEOC.
Okay.
Right? And actually, there's a rule that says you can't bring in the findings from the agency into court.
So it's okay. Yeah. So it's literally a step.
It's just a step.
A barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe with good intention.
Right. I'm trying to be fair to both sides.
Right.
But yeah, you're reading it correctly.
Yeah, fair. And then so then you get that, and then what happens?
So then you file, and we filed all our cases in federal court. There's a bunch of reasons for that. You can file employment cases in state court too. Federal court takes a little bit longer, based in Denver for us, and then you're into litigation. So once you're in litigation, you file the complaint. There's an initial round of kind of motions practice. The other side can ask the court to dismiss it right away. A couple other things can happen there. Then you go into scheduling, where you meet with the court and schedule out the whole case. Discovery then starts. Discovery is depositions and written questions and all the trying to learn about all the facts of the case prior to trial. After discovery closes, there's another round of motions practice where both sides are kind of maneuvering to try to get the case dismissed or narrow the scope, and a bunch of things happen there. Then you move into pretrial phase. If you survive that, then you move into pretrial phase, which is, again, another round of motions trying to limit evidence and working with the other side about trial prep and who the witnesses are and how long it's going to take and all that.
Crazy.
Yeah. And that takes at least... I was
going to say, this is months, years?
Well, years. Yeah, years. From the time of the discrimination, you've got 300 days to file a charge. So depending on when the client comes in, obviously we try to get it filed before then, but we want time to try to reach out and get it settled in that 300 days. So you can plan that takes maybe 6 months. Then in the agency, it has to be there for at least 180 days, but it can be there for a lot longer if the client wants to see what the determination is going to be.
Right.
So that can take another at least 6 months to a year to get through the agency. So you're at least a year and a half deep by the time you file the case. Once you file the case, you've got, courts try to get discovery done within 8 months or so, but that's really aggressive, and usually it gets extended as you work through it. Everybody's asking for extensions. And then you've got motion for summary judgment. I've had motions for summary judgment where a judge, you have all these quick deadlines to get it filed, so they happen quickly. And then I've had judges sit on them for 8 or 9 months,
of course,
where you just don't get a ruling, and then you got to wait for trial to get scheduled, and they've got to fit it into their docket, and that can just bump it out another 4 or 5 months. And
it sounds like a nightmare.
It takes forever. It is a nightmare. Yeah.
Walk me through what's going on now with your clients through this process. Like, what's that experience like for, let's talk about the human element.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, and
when you used to do
when I was in that, doing that full time, and again, by the time we hit our 4th year, I should backtrack a little bit, and we had kind of gotten that pipeline built up. We were able to stop doing all the other things,
right, and
just focus on this. And there was enough need, because there's not many lawyers out here doing that.
I want to come back to that question of the human element.
Yeah.
But at that stage for you, we're 4 years into the business. This has become, I'm going to call it a specialty.
Yeah.
And I know you can't specialize, but I'm going to call it a specialty. It's become the bulk of your the primary of your business.
Yeah.
At that stage right then, are you happy? Are you liking it? Are you fulfilled? Like what's business like 4 years in? And because there's a shift that happened, and that's what I can't wait to to dive into that. But it's funny, and I relate so much to it. But I've learned so much about the type of work I don't want to do here. Yeah. And the stories are so similar. Like when we first started, I took every job I could get.
Absolutely, that's how you start.
$100, no problem. Rock and roll. And then now I'm learning like the stuff I enjoy and the stuff that I'm better at and the things that make me happy and things like that.
Yeah.
But that has taken what it has taken is a tremendous amount of the stuff that I don't like.
Yeah.
To teach me that. What that's looked like.
Absolutely.
And I know that you've had a shift, which we'll get to. But I'm curious, like, because your practice is 10 years old, 4 years in now, and I think it's worth noting that at this point you're in. It's deep. Like There's multi-year cases happen. I mean, it's not like luckily for me in a marketing agency, I think the longest project I've ever done has been a couple months.
That's right. Yeah.
So just talk me through like your perspective of your practice, law, the system, and all that. Let's call it 4 years in.
Yeah, early on I was satisfied. I was happy with what I was doing. I felt, I always wanted to be in an area of law where I could sleep at night and know that I was doing good work. I always felt that. I always felt like I was the cause was righteous.
Yeah,
let's say that. I liked the principle of the work I was doing. I was having
like a David and Goliath.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going up. I mean, here I'm a small town Durango lawyer going up against these multinational corporations with these hornets' nests of lawyers, and it's one against 20. I mean, it's. And so probably that was very real.
Or internal legal teams even.
Totally. And I felt there was a lot of excitement about that. I got a real adrenaline hit from it. It was fulfilling a piece of me that needed to be fulfilled because it's something I watched my dad do growing up, and I idolized him. And I remember being like 4 years old and sitting in his office with a legal pad pretending to like take notes, meeting with clients. I mean, it's something that I've just always knew I would do. And so it was feeding that. It was feeding my ego and my sense of importance. And, we'll talk about that more soon. And I was insanely stressed out. And the anxiety was just through the roof. And I very quickly began searching. All these symptoms started coming up, which I won't go into detail about, but there are all these just physical things, like neck pain and stuff that, I mean, as a college athlete and I'm in good shape, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not feeling good. My body doesn't feel good. Yeah, right. And so all these things are happening to me physically, and so I start searching for ways to cope with that, and I found some helpful tools. And we actually had started meditating in law school to deal with the stress of law school. So that was already kind of a fixture in my day-to-day life, and added things and explored things, and but it never really went away.
Right.
As I did it longer,
it's like treating the symptom, not the disease.
The cause. Yeah. And so as I did it longer, I was able to cope better, and you're able to mask the symptoms, but they don't go away.
Right.
They don't go away. And so there's just an immense amount. The problem, one of the many problems with it, and it's not a problem, it's a fact of it.
Just the reality.
It's the reality of litigation. Any litigator you talk to will tell you this, is that it's just immensely stressful.
Sure.
Because you're taking on somebody's livelihood. They lost a job, and to be honest, with employment cases, the only time you're willing to risk going to court on a case is when it's really destroyed somebody's life.
Yeah, well, sure.
Like the damages have to be big enough, and that means that they haven't been able to find work, and there's other stuff going on.
Like
it's a big deal.
Shambles.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, they
for
didn't
them.
just go get a new job.
That's right. Yeah, and so there and the thing I always what's both equal parts fun and exciting about litigation and really, really difficult is every single case is different. Every opposing counsel is different. Every judge is different. So literally there's no one that is the same.
Yeah.
And you can't really predict where this stuff's going to go. And that's kind of fun.
Right.
It's also terrifying. And then on top of that, you have these professional obligations that just really weigh on you in terms of like, am I missing like waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat because I'm like, oh my God, did I miss a deadline?
Dreams. I've gotten past it now, but for a long time, especially the first few years, I would have dreams that I forgot stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and I would wake up and be like, I know I forgot something, but I don't remember what, and trying to keep track of all that stuff. Yeah. That's that whole like doing the thing you do and running the business and the deadlines, and it's not like there's a staff behind you. There's not.
No, I'll tell this. I don't tell this story very often. We had a case that went to the Court of Appeals in Colorado, and spent all this time prepping for it. I did mock trials with lawyers in town. It's a big event. The Court of Appeals had set up a new system for us, lowly rural lawyers, so that we didn't have to drive all the way to Denver.
Yeah.
And so they set up this remote. It was like the first remote appearance system, and you still had to go to the courthouse, but they had this giant TV they wheeled around on this cart, and cameras and stuff, and I through a series of events, the date on my calendar for the oral argument got moved.
Oh no.
And I missed it. I got a call when I was in a meeting. Hey, you're supposed to be on right now, and I missed oral argument. And it was like I thought my life was gonna end.
Like literally, the sky's falling.
Yeah, it was a crisis, and it took me a long time to recover from that. Ended up being fine. We lost the case in the Court of Appeals, and then won in the Supreme Court.
Oh,
and
wow.
It ended up being a great success, but horribly embarrassing. Everything about it was just absolutely horrific. And I was fine. Like it was okay.
Sure, at the end.
In the end,
but there's.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, I can see the sky would be falling.
It was horrific. It took a lot of therapy to get through that one. And it also, I think that was probably one of the first big shock waves that kind of went through my world of like, what am I doing here? Like how important is this job?
The cost of this was bigger than what it,
Yep.
I know those feelings. Like I've had times, and it's why I'm so drawn to your story, because I've been making such intentional shifts in my life and my business, because I mean I've had times when something's so all-consuming for me that I'm like tunnel visioned, and I'm like, what did I just miss with my family and my kids, and like the all-consuming.
Yes.
It's like, for what?
Yeah, that's right.
So walk me through that. Transition forward a little bit, but
Yeah.
at some point you start to realize that this isn't sustainable from a personal perspective, whether that's stress or ethics or whatever. But walk me through that kind of like that transition moment and then the path forward from that.
Yeah, so the transition happened, the hard transition happened in 2023. In reflecting on this, I think it was beginning to happen probably in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And at that point, we had our first kid in 2018, end of 2018, and your life's changing, and so now I've got this person I'm responsible for, and so that causes a shift, and then the anxiety is not going away, and that's beginning to wear on me. The litigation's so all-consuming that you just never stop thinking about it. It's just because of what I was saying earlier, where it's so dynamic and every case is different. You're constantly second guessing. Do I need to add a interrogatory there? I didn't ask about this in the right way. Do I need to redo this? Like, there's just always something about, and it's just always on your mind. And I think to be good at it has to be.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. And so I've been telling people there are three major things that cause the shift. One is becoming a parent. The second was the pandemic, where the work got more intense. We had a huge flood of employment cases in 2020.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and then there were all these brand new laws, and so we're trying to figure out what are the claims and how do you prosecute them, and all of that is happening in this space where I no longer have human contact, which I always really, really valued. It's what I like the most about being a lawyer, is meeting with people and being in a room with them, and helping them through their problems, and helping them problem solve. And so now the work, and I think this happened for a lot of people, you just see the work.
Yeah.
And
you don't see the people behind it.
Yeah.
You don't get to see the good, the outcomes, the reasons,
and
the why.
Yeah, all of it. And so now I'm just faced with this pile of work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is this? And the way I've been saying is that I think the system got exposed. I could really see the system working, right? That was number two. And then the third one was, that in 2022, 2023, all these wars break out. And so I'm looking around the world, and it just seems like there's just war and conflict everywhere. As I moved through 2021, 2022, 2023, we have our second kid in 2021. By 2023, the parenting thing's really hitting hard.
Yeah.
I got two boys at home. I'm mediating conflict all the time. And this is really what I think was the beginning of the big shift, is I found myself saying to my kids over and over again, explaining to them when they're fighting about how to calm down, and that we need to say sorry so that we can move on. And I had this spiel that became
like your go-to statement,
saying it all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you tell them the thing. Everyone has this experience who has kids, even if you don't. Anytime you deal with conflict, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm like, okay, but your brother's screaming bloody murder, and clearly something happened. I didn't see it, but you need to recognize that whatever you did, whether it was intentional or not, made him feel the way he's feeling right now, and you owe him an apology. And that's how this works.
Brilliant.
And that by you apologizing to him, it doesn't mean you're admitting that you did something wrong. It means that you're just seeing him. You're recognizing it's empathy. You're recognizing that you hurt him in whatever way, with your words or your body, and you need to recognize that. And by saying you're sorry, that clears that conflict, and it helps you guys move on. And so I was having that conversation with them.
There's this stack of work on the desk behind.
Yeah.
I'm like clearly seeing it.
Yeah, having this conversation with them over and over again.
Gosh, are we lucky to have kids?
Yeah.
The clarity that they give us.
Yeah.
I just took my kids camping camping in Moab for spring break.
Nice.
And it was just a guy's trip. And I purposely camped down at the bottom of Cane Creek in Moab. And I do it because there's not cell phone service.
Yeah.
And I cried by the fire every night because I'm just like, I love it. And like the lessons that we get to learn from our kids, or like that being a parent or a dad forces us into, is I think the biggest challenge of my life and the greatest blessing. Of like, you know,
I agree.
Because I'm totally seeing that of like, we're coaching them up. You know, you're talking to them about conflict resolution and empathy and, you know, all of these things. And then, you know, and then we go back to work.
I go to work and do the complete opposite. And
well, so adults still haven't learned the same thing we're trying to teach our kids.
That's right. So I'm having this vision of the type of people I want them to be in the world, that I want them to be when they're adults. And then I'm going to work and helping adults do the complete opposite.
Wow. Yeah.
The complete opposite. Litigation is all about not giving an inch. And you never admit anything. You never give anything up. You don't apologize for damn sure.
Right.
And you don't. But that's because of that problem. We have come to, and we do it from an early age. We believe that apologizing is an admission, and
wrong.
It's not. That's not what it is. It's just seeing the other person and their pain and recognizing it. And as we move into this part of the conversation, there's a movement that's a part of this integrative law movement and these other kind of alternative ways to do this, called legalizing the apology. And there are some states who've actually put it into their civil rules that say an apology cannot be used as evidence.
Wow. How crazy to think. Yeah. And because I never even assumed it, because there's that, like, it's kind of ingrained in us.
Yeah.
If somebody apologizes, you assume that they were wrong.
That's right.
And that is so not the case.
Yeah.
So right now, could an apology be technically?
That's the assumption.
Yeah. And even if it's not like by the book or legal, there's that impression.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you're able to get that in front of a jury, most people are gonna say, "Oh, well, you did it. You did the bad thing." If an employer says, "I'm really sorry that this went down this way. I sincerely apologize for that," and a plaintiff's lawyer gets their hands on that, I'm gonna use that to win that case the whole way.
What a fascinating dilemma.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yep. Yeah. So the problem with litigation and the problem with lawyers trained as litigators is that we are relied upon for advice at every step of the process.
Yeah. And you have to do the by the book, like the safe protecting advice.
That's right. And so what happens is when you get lawyers involved early in a conflict, everyone goes into their corners, they lawyer up, and the walls
go up and the whole thing starts.
Yep. And then no one's going to talk. No one's going to share anything. No one's going to say anything. If lawyers aren't involved and humans are allowed to just be humans with one another, different things happen. And sure, maybe physical violence could happen. And that's the theory of why lawyers are there, that we have a peaceful process for resolving conflict. I don't think it's peaceful. We can talk about that more.
Yeah.
But that's the excuse. That's the justification for the litigation system.
And I do want to touch on that a little bit, because we've had some conversations in the past about the emotional toll of litigation.
Yeah.
And whether it's peaceful or not. Yeah. Like so many things in the modern world now, something started off with good intentions, right? Or like it used to be simple, or it was black and white at the time, and here we are in 2025, and things have evolved.
Yeah.
Talk to me about with that sort of, I'll call it just the standard process, or the standard approach. I mean, we touched a little bit earlier there about how complex the process is, how long it is, how drawn out it is. We haven't even talked about how expensive it is, which can just be implied. But talk to me about like the your experience, generally speaking, of somebody who goes through this process and the toll that takes on people just from the humanity perspective.
Yeah, I'm not a therapist, so I can't talk about I don't know much about the clinical side of what is PTSD or what these things look like or what they are. What I know is that what the litigation process does is makes trauma worse. So being fired is traumatic, no matter how it happens, even if it's justified.
Right.
Like even if you didn't show up to work on time too many times and you should have gotten fired, it still hurts to be fired. And it hurts even worse when it's not justified, or even worse when it's justified for a reason that's unlawful, like a protected class.
Right.
So that's a really traumatic experience. The legal system, in my opinion, ignores that trauma, and it actually relies on it because what it forces that client to do is keep reliving that story over and over and over and over and over and over for 4 or 5 years,
and like diving in on it and unpacking it, and
and not only that, you've got someone across the table from you now
picking it apart,
telling you you're a liar, telling you that it's the worst kind of subconscious argument, right?
All of it.
All of it.
I won't go into any details, but I had an issue years ago that evolved and whatever, and I had all this stuff saved for it and all this thing. And then to protect my mental energy, like 18 months ago, I deleted all of it. And then recently somebody was like, hey, do you have that? We're having these other things going on. And I'm like, no. But it was actually really refreshing for me. I felt bad that I couldn't help. I can't help the people that are
that need it
right now. But I just told them the truth. I was like, I
couldn't do it anymore.
I couldn't even have it on my computer. I had to just literally delete, shred it all. I can't imagine, and it was such a tiny thing. But I'm a big old ball of emotion. I'm a whole wreck. Like if I had to do that, I'd be a mess. But so I can't even imagine a multi-years long, thing.
Yeah. So there's so many levels to this. Everyone comes into this process, whether you're a young lawyer or a client or whoever it is, everyone wants justice.
Sure. Yeah, everyone has good intentions.
Yeah. And the problem, one of the problems with the system is that the civil litigation system doesn't necessarily provide that. It can provide trace elements of it. But my experience, particularly with employment law, is you're dealing 9 times out of 10 with an insurance company on the other side. The company that made the decision to terminate isn't really even in the room. They've got an insurance company. The insurance company hires a lawyer.
Right.
The adjuster's in the room. Those are the people making the decision about how much we're going to pay out or not. And you still have, the employer's still there, and you can get, things, and you can get, performance, and you can get them to do X, Y, and Z, but not very often. More often than not, what you're looking for is a paycheck. And the whole system's driven at that, right? Like I'm making a living based on what that return is, and the other side's making a living based on hourly work on the case, and we're all driven by that exchange. And in the midst of all of that is this client,
this person
who's kind of forgotten. Their case isn't
right.
The set of circumstances that happen to them is central, but below that there's a person, and there's trauma, and there's mental anguish,
and there's stress, and
everything. And so the metaphor I've been using, how I began feeling about this, is that because it's hard to conceptualize trauma. We all experience it, but it's hard. It's not. You can't see it.
Right.
So imagine that the termination, the bad thing, whatever it is, the racist comment or whatever it is that hurt you, is an actual cut on your arm, right? And you got a big laceration. This would be akin to going to a doctor, and you go in with this cut on your arm, and the doctor looks at it and says, "Ooh, yeah, that's a nasty one. You probably, if you really wanted to heal that, you'd put stitches in it, and we'd clean it and do all the things we all know." But you know what? Instead of doing that, I have another proposal. Let's leave it open. We're not going to address it at all. I want you to leave it that way for a couple of years. And you'll come in here occasionally.
And we'll rip it open a little bit.
We'll rip it open
pour
more,
some lemon
put some
juice
salt in it. Not only that, I'll invite the other party, and they'll come in. The person that cut you, they can poke it, and they can dump some stuff in it, and
Gosh.
And then you get
Great
to the
analogy.
and then you get to the end of it, and but I'll have a check for you.
Right.
You might have to cut your arm off, because at that point it's not going to be
But
salvageable.
because they cut you,
yeah,
let's make sure you get the check.
yeah, let's get the check first, and then you can work on.
And then we'll sew it up.
The healing.
Yeah.
You can, once you have the money, then you can heal it.
Right.
And I think that really gets to the problem. Is the heart of the problem is this idea that those two things are separate, and not every lawyer does that. I would just say this. I mean, there's a lot of good lawyers out there who are doing trauma informed practice, and they understand the connection, but the problem with litigation is that the system doesn't.
Right.
So you can have a great, well-intentioned lawyer. Subjecting yourself to that system, you're going to get some element of those issues, and you're going to have to relive this, and you're going to have to give a deposition, and you're going to have to go sit in front of a court and give your testimony, and you're going to have to hear the responses from the other side. I mean, all those things are going to happen, and the lawyer can't protect you from that. And so that was my that's where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And the things I was seeing as I was doing it.
And what I love about it, and I want to, because now I want to, obviously now I want to talk about the alternatives and things like that. But before we do too, one of the things that I think is fascinating about your story is the time when a need to change was identified to the time to actually realize that change. See, I'm lucky. Because if I need to change something in my business or my life, I can almost do it overnight.
Yeah.
Like I learned a lot about my agency in the last few months, and I very quickly, stop taking those clients,
right?
Or charge more,
that's
or,
right,
or whatever. Like the things I didn't want to do, I stopped doing.
You just do it
very quickly. I could make the shift.
Yep.
Your world.
Yep.
You're in the thick of these multi-years long
It is slower.
and there's this identity, and I don't know if there's necessarily like an ethical dilemma, but that you need, even if nothing else personally, a new approach and a shift.
Yeah.
But the time horizon on that is years
Yeah.
out. Just walk me through that chapter, like that moment of like how that felt and how you had the patience to, to know that there's light at the other end of the tunnel, but that tunnel's a couple years long.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I could do that.
Yeah.
I'm dead serious.
I know.
Maybe a few months, maybe.
Yeah.
If it were big enough for me, but I'm so impatient that a few weeks is probably really what I'd be looking at.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I will first say I'm one of the least patient people around, and so this has been incredibly difficult. And looking back, it's even hard for me to understand how I did it.
Yeah.
Like even today, I'm like, I don't know how I mustered that amount of patience. So let me walk back a little bit. I think a lot of lawyers feel a lot of the things I've been talking about, the stress, the anxiety, this isn't aligning, like these things. I think a lot of people deal with that. That's why our profession has one of the highest substance abuse rates, one of the highest suicide rates. All of it is because of that.
Right.
End of the summer 2023, through a random series of events, decided to do a therapeutic psilocybin journey. And I'd never done mushrooms before. I had been around them plenty, but for some reason, I've done a lot of other things, but I just had never taken mushrooms recreationally. And so I went into this thing without any concept, and it was we had a guide, and my wife and I sat for each other. So we each took a night, and the other person took care of the other one. And dark room, blindfolds, music, lots of prep work for it. And we took the hero's dose when it was like a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot of mushrooms, and had a really intense experience. And that was on a Friday or Saturday night. And then back to work on Monday, what I hadn't expected is how long it would last. Like, the trip.
I'm laughing, but some of that's good, some of that's not.
I know the trip ended, within 5 hours or so that night. But then the fallout, I mean, you're still in it. And that Monday I went to work. And I had a call with this lawyer who I've worked with a lot, who's a difficult guy. I've had a tough time with him. And I had, for a long time, been doing this practice where I put up a shield before I talk to difficult people. So I do a quick couple-minute meditation, and I have this whole thing I do and put up this shield, which really works. It's actually astonishing how well it works. So I did that, and as I was doing that before the call, I slipped back into the trip. And it was nothing short. It sounds corny, but it was nothing short of a vision.
Right.
I was in our office space, but it looked entirely different. The furniture was all changed. It looked like you've seen now.
Yep.
Comfortable couches,
warm, inviting,
no conference tables. And I without knowing, I was like, this is a place of healing. Like, this is a space where people are experiencing healing at a true level. But it was my office, which was confusing for me at the time. And then there was this big voice. I had been stressed out about this call. It was a litigation matter. And I have very clear physical feelings when I get that level of anxiety, which is all the time.
Yep.
And yeah, and this voice is just this big booming voice that was like, you are killing yourself. If you keep doing this, this will kill you. Your body, and it explained it all. It was like the chemicals that are being released in your body, that's what you're feeling. That's what those feelings are. And those chemicals are more toxic than any amount of alcohol or drugs or cigarettes or anything you could put in your body. You're doing this to yourself, right? And then I snapped out of it. And then this guy's calling, and I do this phone call, and I go home that night, and I told my wife I'm done. I was like, I have to quit. This happened today. Yeah. I'm just going to quit. I can't do this anymore. And she walked me off the ledge, talked me down, and started. That was the beginning. It was literally that night was the beginning of planning how I was going to get out of this. And that was harder than I could ever have imagined. It took an immense amount of therapy. I have a fantastic therapist in town, and she's worked me through all of it. And a lot of my own work and research and reading. We hired a conscious lawyering coach that helped us through a lot of this stuff. And a lot of it, honestly, was, and still is still very much happening. I'm not out of it by any means yet. A deprogramming of my brain.
Yeah.
You get rewired in law school.
Yeah.
They rewire your brain, and then you do it for 10 years. On top of that, it is just
it's ingrained.
So ingrained.
Yeah.
On top of growing up in it, and it's just really in there. And so it took a lot of work, and it was really slow. It was painful. It was hard. There was a lot of ups and downs. There was a period of time where I felt like, I remember saying it was like, I mean, every day I would go from, I'm so glad I'm doing this, to what is happening and where am I, and just kind of crazy back and forth, up and down, emotional swings.
You mentioned there's something that I want to unpack, because I think it's so unique, and I think it's remarkable. And, well, to be honest with you, it's refreshing.
Yeah.
This vision and this clarity,
yeah,
that your law practice can be a place of healing.
Yeah.
Explain that to me.
Well, I couldn't at the moment. Didn't know what that meant. I'm at that moment, I'm a litigator. It's all I know. It's what I do. It didn't really make sense to me. I didn't think there was. when I came home and said I had to quit, that's why. It was because I saw this. I'm honestly, if I think back to that, I think in that moment I thought this means I need to go become a therapist.
Do something else. Yeah.
I need to go retrain, go back to school. I have to do something different.
And so at what point did you learn about this idea of integrative law?
Yeah.
And like walk me through how that becomes a reality.
So it was probably in that week. I mean, it was fast. That happened really quickly. I just started
because it was time for a change.
Yeah, I was just I got to do something. I can't keep doing this anymore. So I started digging, and I just started Googling stuff. And one of the first articles I found is by a guy. I think his first name's Andrew. I shouldn't remember his name, but he calls himself the Barefoot Lawyer, and he's in the UK, out of the UK, and he had a really simple article that I found buried. And I mean, I was really digging for this stuff. It's not easy to find. I feel like it was like a Medium article from like years ago. And it was like a page and a half. And I think it was called something like Law as a Spiritual Practice, something like that. And as I found these articles, I was basically finding new, because I didn't have that language. Yeah. I would never have put that sentence together.
Exactly. That's what
I couldn't have even put that phrase together.
Right.
Because it would sound so insane. And so I was beginning to find things that I could Google. And as I was Googling those things,
because you learned some terms,
then some worlds start opening up. And so within that week, I'd created a binder, which I still have, and the front page is law as a spiritual practice. Like, how do I make law a spiritual practice? Which felt to me like the most healing form of it. And I just started printing all these articles and reading all these articles. And there's a quote that emerged that's on our website that is by a former Supreme Court Chief Justice. And it's an old quote, but he says, I won't remember it verbatim, but something like the purpose of our profession has always been to heal human conflict. Mm. And it's interesting when you start looking back at the history, especially in American kind of jurisprudence and law, it wasn't always like this. Early on, there's some really great quotes by Abraham Lincoln about helping your neighbors get along, and that's our purpose as a lawyer. And the trial system as it exists now is still pretty new. Discovery and the civil rules and the evidentiary rules, I mean, a lot of those have been around for a while, but the bulk of them and the way that it works now and how long it takes and how expensive it is, that's all new. Yeah. Before, back in the day, you just file a complaint and you go to trial next week.
Right.
And that all went away, some of it for good reason, but back to what we said, there's good reasons for this stuff and it gets corrupted. Yeah. And so there's all these great quotes from that time period where it's just like our role as lawyers is to help people resolve this stuff.
And so you started realizing, which I just love, and you started realizing that it's possible to do both.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm like, all right, maybe I don't have to quit my job. I can just do this very, very differently.
Which is still just such an enormous shift.
It's essentially quitting my job.
Yeah. Well, I relate to it though, and I don't claim that it's anywhere near, those stresses or anything. But running an agency is insanely stressful. And I've had times where I've told my wife, my business partner, I'm like, I have nothing to lose.
Yeah, right.
Like it literally, at this point, I can work 100 hours a week.
Yeah.
And make the money I'm making in any industry, in any job, in any field, my current. The current situation is not hard to replicate. Right. I could go do that anywhere. Yeah. So I might as well try to make it better. Yeah. I might as well try to improve it. So I relate to that so much of it's like, what else am I going to do?
Yeah, I know.
That's right. It's the only thing I know. I know the current way isn't working. I'm going to kill myself from stress and it's not sustainable for sure. So a fundamental shift has to happen. Yeah. And how cool to consider the fact that fundamental shift can happen and the expertise can remain. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the best of both worlds.
That's right.
And that's why I relate to your story so much, because it's the same, it's not nearly as drastic but the same thing I've been working on in my agency is it's I want to crush it for people. I want to
Yeah.
make massive impacts on people's businesses and work with people that appreciate me and
Yep.
get paid accordingly, you know, like do it
Yeah.
right for people. And so I just love hearing that. So,
Yeah.
okay, so you start to realize then that it's possible to do both.
I begin realizing that other people have tried. At that point, I don't think it. In that phase, I didn't think it was possible.
Good
but
clarification.
I saw some light, very, very, very tiny dot of light
At the 4 years
end
down
of
the
a
tunnel.
very
Yeah.
long tunnel. And I started digging, and so I found one of the first books I found is called "Lawyers as Peacemakers," which is written by Kim Wright, and she's who we hired as our conscious lawyer and coach. And that's basically an instruction manual for doing this. It literally is like I'm aware of how you're practicing law. There's a different way to do it. Here's what those are, and here's how you do
How
this.
you get there.
Yeah. And that was mind blowing. And then a whole series of things happened. I mean, it took me, that was summer of 2023 that I had the psilocybin experience. It was July. And then it took me until the end of 2023, a solid 6 months, if not early 2024, to say out loud, I'm not going to litigate anymore. I literally couldn't say it.
Yeah.
And
I understand.
There was a moment where I realized every time I talked about it, I was saying, if I decide I'm not going to litigate anymore, or when I decide I'm not going to litigate anymore, I couldn't say out loud, I don't litigate. I couldn't say it in the present tense.
See, but there's I relate to that because there's so much complexity to it.
Yeah.
Like it's first of all, it's all you know.
Yep.
Generally speaking.
Totally.
The business relies on it.
Yep.
Your livelihood relies on
Yep.
it. Your ability to support your family
That's right.
relies on it.
Yep.
Your network, your referrals, your reputation. I mean, it's
Everything.
not a little thing
Yep.
to just not litigate anymore.
That's right. That's right. Oh, and it's tied into my identity, my ego,
all of it.
It's deep. It's deep, deep, deep. And that's where my therapist came into play really, and she helped that. We actually did role playing where I would say that out loud to a client.
Yeah.
Which was just insanely difficult.
I won't go into I relate. That's all
Yeah,
I'll say.
yeah. And so I finally got to the point in 2024 where I was saying that to people, and that's when I stopped. And then I just finished my last case in January, so
Yeah.
it took
It
a
took
little over a year.
Yeah.
I mean,
because you had to start saying it.
Yeah.
Which also meant you're turning down work.
That's right.
And there's this, and that's what why I'm glad we have a few extra
Yeah,
minutes,
yeah.
because that chapter is fascinating to me, because you can't just flip to this new model overnight.
Yeah.
Like you had to sacrifice, you had to believe in it enough to stop taking work 18 months ago
Yeah.
and say, I'm not going to litigate anymore.
Yeah.
Even though that's the whole thing that the business is built on, all of the things I just talked about, supporting your family, knowing that has to kind of wrap up before this new model can. Obviously that you were I'm going to call it a breaking point. I don't mean to be over dramatic, but
no, yeah.
The drastic change had to happen. Where did you find the courage and where did you find the courage to do that? Because that leaves such a long period of unknowns. Because it's not like you close your door and start a new practice with a new model.
I know. It's so funny. I don't. It's hard for me to label it as courage.
It's courageous.
I know. I've had people. You're not the first one to say that to me, and but it's hard for me to accept that. The reason is because it just felt like necessity. It felt like I didn't have any other option.
I get it.
There wasn't. It wasn't like. You know what it was? It was the veil had been pulled back a little bit, and I'd seen something that I couldn't unsee.
Yep.
And so there wasn't. It wasn't just like I can ignore that and just go back to doing what I was doing. It was like either I'm gonna do this because I have to, and there's no other way to do it, and it's either gonna work or it's not. And if it doesn't work,
I'll do something else anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is ending one way or another. That's the path I'm on now. And so for me, it's never felt courageous. It's just felt like I didn't have another option.
Choice. Yeah. So walk me through now current current model? Like what is integrative law?
I'm still learning that. So I'll say that in 2024, I spent a lot of time studying mediation, and I did 3 different mediation training programs, which all answers that question. And in going back to what litigators do, if you talk to someone who litigates in civil law, not family relations, but if they're doing personal injury, employment, this kind of general civil stuff, ask them what mediation is. They'll all give you the same answer. They'll tell you it's 2 parties, they're separated, they sit in rooms with their lawyers, and the mediator goes back and forth and tries to settle the case. That's all I knew mediation was. And I thought it was insane to propose that it would be anything other than that.
Right.
I can't even tell you how strong of a believer I was in that system, and that I truly believed you cannot put people in the same room.
Only way. Yeah.
We would spend significant, in some cases, amounts of time, the lawyers and mediators, talking about coordinating how everyone's going to arrive at the mediation so that they don't run into each other in the hallway.
Right.
Like it was this big deal.
It's gospel.
Yeah. So I did these mediation classes. I did a remote one with the Colorado Bar Association. I did an in-person one here in town. And I did another one in California at a Zen monastery in a yurt with this program that's been around for a long time called the Center for Understanding Conflict. And those, it took me all 3 of those to fully again, deprogram that part of my brain and understand that that adults are big kids who can get in a room together and can have healthy conflict.
If your son can say sorry, so
anyone can do it. And so I got trained in that system. It took a year to get through that. At the same time, I'm winding down the practice, and at the same time, I'm trying to explore. And I'm kind of, with every client that comes in, trying different things that feel right for that person, which is really what this is all about. So integrative law at its core is it's not putting the client in the center, because again, you can argue that that's always the case. But it is the client's values are the center of the practice. So, for instance, most people, like 99% of people that come in for a consultation with me over the years, will say, "I'm not litigious.
Right. I'm not sue happy.
I've never done this before. I don't want to do this, but it's so bad. I've got to do something.
Like I have to do something. Yeah."
That's, again, 99% of people say that. That's a value statement. That's a statement about who they are as a person, who they want to be in the world. And as lawyers, when you're in that practice, you just ignore that. Just, okay, thanks, I appreciate that. But there's only one way to do this.
Right.
If you want X, Y, and Z, we have to sue them, and here's the process. This process is, tell me some more about that. Why don't you want to do that? Is it because you have a family you'd rather be spending time with? Is it because, what is it? There's something there. Or do you value being peaceful? You value not being someone who goes out and stirs that stuff up in the world. And so the point of integrative law is focusing on that, and that drives the bus. And so we follow the clients where they want to go and how they want to get there, by helping them bring out what those things are that are important to them.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, people don't want to sue other people. And you say, okay, so let's try a different way.
Yeah.
And it might or might not work, but I'm learning, as I'm still advocating for people. I'm still sending letters, and we've changed the tone, and we're calling them invitations instead of demands. And there's
love that.
There's all these changes we've made in kind of the functionality and the practicality of it, technical process. But the biggest difference is, that we have to focus on what resolution means for any individual person. And that means different things. And it's okay if resolution for that person just means they've gotten to talk about it a bunch
Right.
and vent about it and maybe send a letter. And for some people, that's enough. And even if they don't get a response, they've
spoken their piece and they're,
Yep. And so it's expanding the scope that resolution doesn't just mean getting a check. Settlement doesn't mean just forcing the other person to do something you want them to do.
Put a monetary amount on it. Yeah.
It can be internal resolution. It doesn't have to involve the other person. One of the things I really struggled with, the phrase "it takes two to tango." I would say that all the time in that gap year, and I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, how I can't do this if I can't get the other party involved. If they don't engage, how can I do my job? I can't do it. It takes two to tango, and I've now been able to let that go.
Have you read the Let Them theory?
No,
you should read the Let Them theory.
Yeah, that
Mel
sounds
Robbins
good. Okay.
is the author.
Yeah.
And it's called the Let Them theory.
I like that.
But it's basically the idea that it doesn't take two to tango.
Yeah. Yep.
And let them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great read.
So
you would geek out over.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Just the title alone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the theory. And that's the theory behind this version of mediation is let them talk.
Yeah.
Let them talk. They're adults.
Right.
They can fix this on their own. They don't need me to tell them. Again, the people come in and the first questions they ask are, do I have a case? How much is it worth?
Yeah.
That's what the two answers they need to make the decision of, am I going to sue somebody? Rightfully so. That's what you need to know. As soon as I answer that question, that number never goes away. So if I tell them, I think your case is worth approximately $150,000, that number is now in their head, and that's what they want.
That's the number, yeah.
If I don't answer that question, say, I don't know what your case is worth, what would you like to get out of this? And they say, well, I don't know. Money's not important to me. What's important is that this doesn't happen to anyone else in the future, and I get some kind of recognition that something bad happened.
Right.
They hear me. Okay, well, those two things we can figure that out. Point is, if you let them figure out what they want and talk to the other person about what they want.
Now there's multiple paths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lawyers get involved and it's one way.
One path.
There's one way through this. I'm fighting that way. The other side's pushing back, and that's it. And along the way, we never let the parties talk.
Ever.
Yeah.
And we never deviate from the path.
Cardinal rule.
We're on our way.
Yeah.
So, which I love it. And I'm assuming, I like to think I'm a pretty normal guy. Mm-hmm. And when I hear this, I'm like, it's such a no-brainer. Like,
yeah,
oh my
I know.
gosh.
I know.
What has been, because now that you're into the flow of it, and then walk me through what that's been like. What's been the reception of, because you're still getting the calls from people having the same problem.
Yeah. Yep.
And now you're presenting an alternative solution.
Yeah.
What's been the response like? How have people reacted to this approach?
Yeah, well, again, I'm still really figuring out what the approach is and how to employ it effectively. But I've gotten all kinds of responses. I mean, some people are dead set on suing people.
Sure.
And so they hear this and they kind of laugh it off and ask for referrals, and I gladly give it to them.
No problem. Yeah.
Others, the majority of clients are refreshed and they say, oh my God, this is great. I want to try that. Let's do that first. Of course I want to do that instead of litigating. People always seem to have this desire to do it. But I've also found that as I go through the process with them, I have more time to explain to them what litigation actually is.
And at least educate them more.
Yeah. And a lot of times when people start to really understand what the process looks like, that wears off.
Yeah.
I've also gotten really interesting experiences or responses from lawyers on the other side. And I've had lawyers literally tell me, I've explained to them what I'm doing, and I had one lawyer, and there was this long pause after I finished, and he said, "You're speaking Greek to me. I don't know what I don't know what that means. I don't even know what you just said." And then I've had other lawyers who are like, "This is amazing. I want to do this. How do we? I'm so thankful you're doing it this way." And I've had conversations with defense counsel, with opposing counsel, some of whom I've worked with a lot in the past and have litigated with.
Gone to battle against,
who are are telling me things and opening up to me in a way that I never would have dreamed of.
Wow.
I've had, in just a couple months of doing this, I've had two different, an insurance adjuster and a lawyer, just outright in the early conversations tell me what their deductible is. Like, here's how much we're going to have to pay in order to, go through this process. And
wow.
And that kind of transparency is unheard of.
Yeah. But so much easier.
So much easier.
Because you're probably going to end up at a similar end result anyway.
I know. That's right. And it's a lot less expensive to get it done with early.
Are you, and with, at the risk of, don't let it, I don't, well, we're going to wrap soon.
Yeah,
but I'm curious, two measurements.
Yeah.
One of which is quantifiable, one of which is anecdotal.
Okay.
Money and happiness.
Yeah.
Walk me through how your life has evolved since the shift from a financial perspective, income, business-wise, all of that stuff, and happiness, stress level, presence with your family, enjoyment of life.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And are they inversely related? Are they, I'm very fascinated about, I think I know the softer side of it.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated how this has impacted the economics.
Yeah. Well, I'll do that first. Here's what I'll say. Being a plaintiff's lawyer is a bizarre way to make a living. It's a lot like realtor. Anyone who's working on commission knows what that feels like. I think it's a little bit more extreme on our end because of the investment we have to actually, not only are we not getting paid, we're putting money into the case. And so you lose one of those cases and you've set yourself back years. And
like every case is make or break.
Yeah. Yep. And so,
which also contributes to the all-consuming nature of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the finances of it, you have to talk about it within that context. For 10 years, we were living this lifestyle of feast and famine. So we would go months and months without paying ourselves, months, and rack up credit card debt. Everything goes on the credit cards. And we had a few of them, and you just watch them.
Yeah.
You just watch them grow, one for the business, and this debt piles up, and then you get a windfall and you pay them all off. And you refill the savings, and then you do it all again.
I know it well.
And so, and you're working out of the emergency savings account first, and then once you drain that, then you move to the credit cards, and then you do it again. And it was that over and over and over and again. And sometimes you get ahead, sometimes you fall behind. I mean, but it was just so volatile.
Yeah.
And because of that, I always the way I've talked about money really since law school, because the immense amount of debt we're in with student loans, is that it's just monopoly money.
Yeah.
It just all feels fake. And so the coping mechanism on the financial side for us was it's just not really real. And so you just don't really pay attention to it. You just know you got enough credit limit on your cards to cover what you need. Hopefully, we were doing hourly work to pay as much as we could as we went.
Sure.
But because of that structure, for us, we just weren't paying attention to our money.
Right.
We didn't have a budget. We just weren't paying attention to it. You're spending kind of frivolously.
Right.
When you get you have all the wants that you kind of accumulate in your mind
And
throughout the year.
Yeah.
You get a big windfall and you go out and buy all the stuff.
Right.
And that's dangerous. It's a dangerous way to live financially. And so ending that that's been about 3 months. And we are actually living in a cash budget.
Now
right?
There's a budget.
We have stopped using credit cards. We used our last settlement to pay off all our credit card debts. We have no more credit card debt. We've taken all of our all of our monthly expenses off of the credit cards. So nothing's on the credit cards anymore. It's all hitting our bank account. We're tracking, we're developing a budget, like all the things that we know you need to do. We're not dumb, but now we can do that. Right. Before you just couldn't because it was so depressing.
So volatile.
It's so depressing. You just go crazy trying to, how do you do a budget, So it's become real. Money's become real again. That's the best way I can describe it. And that also means what I didn't really expect is I'm more feeling the ebb and flow of work now, and this kind of, when we're busy and when we're not, and there's weeks where it's slow, and you'd start managing that. So that's the financial piece, and I think I'll know by the end of the year. But my suspicion is we'll easily do as well as we've ever done.
You think?
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if might do better. Yeah, might do better. Well, because we're paying attention to it, so we're not spending like we were. Right. So like before, and it's everything from like running the firm. So you get marketed all of these tools to help you manage litigation, and I had all these different software programs to keep cases in and track evidence, and all these expenses that we've gotten rid of. And before you just put it on the credit card. I need that. I need that. I need that. We can't not. Yeah. So it'd be interesting. If nothing else, I don't know that we'll make a whole lot more, but we're going to save a lot more on expenses.
Yeah. So the upside's there for sure.
There'll be more take home.
Right. Yeah. Tell me about the rest of it.
Yeah, the home piece. This is an interesting one because what we've done, and this gets into my wife and I's dynamic. She's suspended her license, so she went through this process too. She has her own version of this story, and she went on, decided to go on sabbatical in September-ish of last year. And she was doing at that point only estate planning, so she didn't have the litigation pipeline. Took her about 4 months to wind that down, and then by January she was able to kind of really actually take a break. And I take a break from law. Yeah. She's still everything else, right? And doing most of the work at home and with the kids and all that stuff. So she got to stop being a lawyer. She's still in that phase. What that means is I'm the sole provider right now. And what that has meant is kind of, steady and long hours at work. I'm working a lot. But the anxiety is gone. I'm much happier. Work is easier. It's not easier. It's more enjoyable. Yeah. And I don't have the constant. What it's felt like is a release of pressure. Yeah. The constant kind of worry and fear and all of that, and more than anything, I'm just able to be myself, which I wasn't before. Right. I was living other people's versions of myself. Right. We did an exercise in the Conscious Lawyering Coach where we had to write a page about what we believed our inherited purpose was. So we wrote about what we felt our purpose was, and then it was this curveball question: write about what do you think your inherited purpose is? And it took a long time. It took me a good week to like really ponder that and think about it and write it. But after I did, it was one of those breakthrough moments where I'm like, oh my God, this isn't my life. I'm living other people's
and isn't
versions.
It crazy how like, you look back with the benefit of hindsight and it's like, oh my gosh, that evolved. Yeah. Yeah. Like all of a sudden I'm doing all these things I think I'm supposed to be doing. Yep.
And you're 10 years in.
And why? And says who?
I know.
It's like, because it's what I've always done, or it's what, what the expectations have been, or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's better. I'm better. I feel more present when I am home with the kids. The weekends are easier because I'm not constantly thinking about stuff, but I'm also very much still in this growing pain transition phase. Pick your heart. Yeah. Yeah. But the anxiety, I haven't put words to this yet, but the anxiety that I feel now, pales.
It's different
in comparison. It's a
almost
different
like
brand.
Purpose.
Yeah.
Anxiety.
Yeah.
It's like.
Yeah.
I get it. It's your own anxiety.
Yes. Yeah. It's not fear based.
Yeah.
It's more of like
pressure. Like we got to build. You got work to do.
Yeah. Exactly.
You got work to do.
It's things to do.
Yeah.
I got things to figure out. That's gonna take a couple of years. It feels good. It's exciting.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's an excitement to it, and it's stuff I want to be doing.
And when I got to that stage with my agency, it charged me.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like I was working. I'd come in for a few hours on Saturday because I just had I had productive energy, and I'm like I would post on my Instagram. I have work to do.
Yeah.
Like I've worked, but it's motivating. Yeah. Like I'm making meaningful shifts, meaningful changes that are going to impact my happiness levels, my time at home, all of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, life isn't always going to be sunshine and rainbow.
No.
At least it's like purposeful stress now.
Yes.
Intentional stress.
Like I said, I don't even have words for it. It's an entirely different, they're not even, we don't have words good. It's one of the English language, there aren't enough words for anxiety.
Right.
This is a different brand.
Right.
It's an entirely different word. That thing that was there with litigation.
That was unhealthy, a beast
and it's,
of a...
Yeah. It's a monster that's just always there, and it's gone.
This is like... well, the only way I can describe it is healthy.
Yeah.
It's sustainable.
It's like anxious energy.
Yeah.
It's not anxiety.
Right.
But it's this kind of buzz that
almost excitement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's closer to that than it is fear.
Right.
Which is this other thing.
Right. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah. Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I told you early on, I feel like I'm like, oh man, I said, unrealistic expectations, because I could talk to you about this for hours and hours and hours.
I could too.
We need to do it again.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you. So thank you for giving me your time.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for letting me run over.
Yeah.
But also thank you for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing a story.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for being willing to look at an industry, flip it on its head, and consider the fact that there might be a better way to do things.
Yeah.
And then for having the courage to act on it. And I am going to say it's courage because it is. Because I don't know if you understand how profoundly impactful that is for so many people in so many industries that are stuck in these, this is the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
Or this is the way we have to do it or whatever. And I've had hundreds of these conversations of people that are, fighting the same battles or dealing with the same things. And I love it when I get to hear the stories of, and then, to think about the fact that you're working on this reality of a law practice that's also a place of healing is refreshing, and it's remarkable.
Yeah.
So I've got a tip for you.
Oh, yeah.
It's these are my Inspire by Example shirts.
Oh, sweet. That's awesome.
I'm working on my, Inspire by Example movement, but it's because you truly are inspiring by example. And just by making the decisions that you're making, living the life that you're living, taking the risks that you're living, it's refreshing, and the world needs more of it. So Dave, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you.